Hi, and welcome to Coding Temple Cyber Week Decoded Special. Today, we shift our focus towards cybersecurity in organizations in the world of AI. And we are going to send a strong message to all the leaders out there. Cybersecurity isn't a tech issue anymore, it's an executive responsibility. And Darren Mott, a former FBI cybercrime investigator, joins us to explain why your leadership team is the first line of defense and how AI is rewriting the landscape in real time. So, hi, Darren. Do you mind telling our audience what is it that you do?
Sure, Ruda. Thanks so much for having me on your podcast. I appreciate it. As a podcaster myself, it's always nice to be on the other side and just have to answer the questions as opposed to come up with the questions and do all that kind of stuff. So, like you mentioned, I was an FBI special agent for 20 years, started in 1999. This was way back when cyber was just kind of getting going from a criminal and a nation state type of thing. And did that for, like I said, for 20 years across multiple field offices, went to FBI headquarters, worked with foreign partners all over the world to try to figure out this cyber stuff. I retired in 2019 and went to work for a clear defense contractor and basically managed a cybersecurity operations center as part of an Omri contract. Did that until January of this year. And I left that to start my own business, which does cyber focused investigations, private investigations, and consulting for firms. One of my big areas is do a lot of expert witness testimony for data breach cases, talking about the risk from PII to people who lose their data and data breaches and things like that. So I kind of have my fingers in a lot of different areas.
Wow, that sounds like some serious work that you've done in your lifetime already. So, you worked at a federal level, tracking some of the most dangerous cyber threats. So, from that vantage point, what do most business leaders still not understand about the real risks?
Well, that's a great question. I actually did a podcast similar to that question last week with another friend of mine who is in your neck of the woods, used to work for UK intelligence. And so we were asking the question, why don't businesses listen to the cyber people, right? Because you and I and people in our field are on LinkedIn all the time talking about here's what the threats are, here's what companies need to know. Yet businesses, even businesses that should know better, your Microsoft, your Palo Alto, pick your cyber focused company of choice. They've probably had some kind of cyber incident. So they're not even really doing things right. So I think too many companies think that they're either too small to even be targeted. So bad guys aren't going to come for me. I don't have anything anyone would want, when the reverse is actually true. Bad guys don't, some do. I mean, it depends on how you look at cyber threats. And I have a pyramid that I show in my presentations that kind of lists out the pyramid of threats. And from the script kiddies at the bottom all the way up to the nation state guys, different actors have different motivations for what it is that they do. And if a nation state actor deems your company worthy for its interest because you work in national defense or you have a specific piece of intellectual property that makes you, number one in the world, even though you're a small company, nation state guys, especially China, are going to want to steal that information. Criminal guys just want money. So if they can, they'll blast out emails and just hope someone in your company clicks a link. So you didn't do the right amount of training or you don't have the right processes in place to see when bad action occurs, because there's plenty of companies that don't do network monitoring and watch what happens across their network because they can't afford it. It's expensive. Cybersecurity is a cost. So the problem is businesses don't think they have anything anyone would want, and they don't think they'd ever be a victim. Now, I've never gone to a company, and usually most of the time, 90% of the time, companies found out they were victims because the FBI came to them and said, is this your data? You may want to know that someone's in your network, because as you know, the dwell time for a very sophisticated actor in a corporate network is about 300 days, meaning the bad guy's roting around there for 300 days before he really even does anything.
Wow. And so, do you have any recent examples that stood out to you of such big corporations potentially losing a lot of money just because they didn't start
Sure.
cybersecurity?
Yeah. The best one I have, because it recently concluded its lawsuit, was the Caesars, which is the big casino here in the United States. They make billions of dollars a year on gambling and hotels and stuff like that. They had a data breach, lost millions of people's personal identifiable information. So in addition to paying the ransom, I think they paid a ransom, I can't be sure, but let's assume they paid a couple $1 million in ransom. They also got sued and settled for $25 million. So instead of investing at the front end to do the basic things you should do from a cybersecurity perspective, they clearly didn't do those things because they got compromised. They had a ransomware incident. They had their data stolen. And then they recognized that they were liable for losing everybody's information, and they chose to settle that case. So that's a big one. But I mean, it's pick your problem. I mean, we have a company here in the US that handles, like, for teachers. It's called School, I think, SKOOL. Don't quote me on the name, but I think that's the name. But so they handle information for school districts all over the country. They got hacked and lost all the stuff. And there were hundreds, if not thousands, of school districts that use this particular system. Student data, teacher data, all that stuff was lost. Because, and again, they thought, well, we're an educational entity. Why would anybody want to hack us? Because we don't have any money or whatever, but they did. And you can't go a day without seeing some issue. I mean, there was an issue with Zoom the other day. This is not that this Zoom got hacked, but a vulnerability within Zoom where the North Koreans used it. They were able to go to a company and get a job interview. And during the job interview, the window popped up for the person who was being interviewed, and they said, "I can't hear you." And he said, "Well, you need a special app to download to hear my microphone." So the person downloaded the app and installed malware on the company system. So it's simple things like that that's happening all over the place.
Oh, wow. And so who in organizations normally is responsible for making sure the cybersecurity systems are in place? Who is responsible
Oh,
for ensuring cybersecurity systems are in place?
that's a good question. It's going to depend on the company, because that's another big interesting talking point that I talk a lot about is you have IT departments and you have cybersecurity. So those are two things are not the same, but many companies think they are the same. And so they say, "Hey, I have an IT guy. My cybersecurity is solved. I have someone who knows the cybers," right? That's my favorite term, is the cybers, because especially when it comes to politicians, because politicians are trying to do the cybers all the time and they're idiots, but that's another topic for another conversation. But so companies think, "I have an IT department. My cyber's solved," but it's not. Cybersecurity is a completely different animal than your IT infrastructure. And a lot of times, and I've seen this in organizations I've been in, the IT department or the IT group and the cybersecurity group should work like this, but they work like this. The IT, like, "Hey, we don't, that's, if I was to incorporate that cybersecurity thing you're telling me, the whatever that particular control is, it's going to be a pain in the butt for me to do it. So I'd rather not do that if I don't have to." Well, the cybersecurity, I go, "Look, if you don't do it, we're going to have this problem." And usually, in more times than not, the cybersecurity guy is proven right over time, because the IT guys didn't take the security suggestion and something bad happens. Be it business email compromise, be it ransomware, be it, the Russians in the system. I mean, pick your poison there. But, if you're a company, you need some kind of cybersecurity guidance, consulting, CISO. I mean, even CISOs are basically hired for a lot of big companies, so they have someone they can blame when they have an incident, and they don't listen to the guy's strategic plan. So he's got the word chief in his title, but no one's listening to him. So, I mean, there's a lot of areas here for companies to find support from companies that can help them enhance their cyber capabilities, if nothing else, by just saying, here's things you need to be looking at that you need to address so you don't have this problem, right? I mean, in the UK, there's this cybersecurity and resiliency bill or act that's coming in up for approval at some point this year. If you're a data center, you're an MSP, or you're in critical national infrastructure, if you have a cyber incident and you don't resolve it within 3 days, the government's going to fine you $100,000 a day for every day you haven't resolved it, or 10% of your turnover. So all these companies that aren't paying attention to cybersecurity now are going to have to pay attention to it. And that particular model is going to be interesting to see how that is portrayed globally, where other countries may say, "Hey, that's working for the UK. Maybe we should do something similar." It's going to be harder, like in the US, and think, because our system is so kind of messy. But you have other, more cohesive governments in the EU, especially, will probably deploy something similar to that. Like, all the EU companies follow GDPR, so it's not unreasonable to think that when this Resiliency Act comes into play, that the EU countries won't say, "Hey, that's a good idea. Let's do the same thing."
Interesting. So it sounds like there's, regulations that are coming in, and companies should be more and more aware of that, but it's still down to the leaders in the company to drive that, whether you have IT, cybersecurity departments, or don't have those, it's still down to the leaders. So this executive uninvolvement,
Yep.
or unawareness, that creates vulnerabilities. And what are your thoughts about that?
So the big problem, right, is you got to look at cybersecurity, or anything related to protecting your network assets or your digital assets is a cost to your company. It's not going to make you money. It's a cost. And that's what leaders look at is what's the cost to me? How does this, if I've got to pay $10,000 a month for cybersecurity, what do I get from that? What they don't necessarily realize is, okay, so maybe you're investing 5,000, 10,000 a month in some kind of cybersecurity program, some kind of budget, whatever. If you have a single data breach, the average cost for a data breach is $4.45 million, according to the latest IBM study. I guess 2023, it's probably higher now. So your leaders are making that, I think, an uninformed assumption, or maybe they just don't know that, sure, I got to pay $10,000 a month. That's $100,000 and $120,000 a year. That's expensive, and I'm not making anything from that. I'm not going to invest in it. But if they have that one data breach incident, they're looking at $4 to $5 million to deal with it, and not including all the fines we're talking about. So I don't think they view it correctly. There's just not enough leaders in cybersecurity to make these points. I mean, we talk about the skill gap or the job gap where you have hundreds of thousands of vacant cybersecurity jobs and no one to fill them. It's even worse on the leadership side. People go into cybersecurity to be testers, SIM analysts, intelligence analysts. Too few of them are taking leadership skill courses or leadership training to then go into a company and say, look, here's what we have from a leadership perspective. Here's what we have to do. Because if we spend this amount of money up front for good cyber hygiene, it will read down to our benefit at the end of the day, because we won't have that single loss event that's going to cost us all sorts of other problems. And we can invest those monies in finding other clients. Other clients may come to us because now we are now more secure because we're taking cybersecurity seriously. They know we'll protect their data. There was a logistics company in the UK called Knights of Old that had been around since the 1800s. They had a ransomware incident. The ransomware cost was $1 million. They figured they could not pay the ransom and just kind of fix their system. They couldn't fix their system. They went out of business.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I guess these are more and more prominent right now because we hear every single day data breach here, data breach there. And that's in a way probably because there's an explosion of AI. Everywhere are racing to implement AI, not necessarily always thinking through all the data protection, shadow IT, or any unintended exposure. So what's your take on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, AI, with every technology, there's good, there's bad, right? The problem is, as the new technology comes, the bad guys figure out how to exploit it first. So the bad guys figure, okay, this is how I can use AI to make better social engineering emails, to do what we call grandma's call scams over here, where you get a call from your grandchild. It sounds just like Johnny, and grandma thinks, oh, Johnny's in jail. I need to send him $5,000 so he can get out of jail. Those kind of scams are now being able to be used much more efficiently because it sounds like Johnny, because Johnny has a TikTok account and they can pull Johnny's voice off of TikTok and then duplicate it using AI to make it sound like an AI voice, right? So there's bad things that can happen with AI, but the good guys can figure out how to use AI to offset what the bad guys are doing. The problem is the companies, again, it's a cost, have to figure out if they're going to invest in it from that perspective. Now, being able to use AI to make your jobs easier, to do marketing easier. I'm building a startup right now and I'm using AI for a lot of different things. AI has great benefits. There's a lot of things it does well, a lot of things it doesn't do well. So you can't rely on everything. If I'm doing a data breach case and I'm writing an expert witness report, I'm not relying on AI to write it for me because it's going to hallucinate things. So there's been plenty of lawyers that have gotten in trouble for using AI and they've cited cases that didn't exist. So you have to go into it with an understanding. It's really not intelligence. It's simply taking information it has and presenting it to you in a way it thinks you want it quicker than if you were to do it yourself. There's certainly things that make things quicker and easier, right? But you can't just rely on it as that's the answer. So, and I think that's where maybe leaders are, again, it's another thing they're not trained on. So they're not paying attention to it well enough, other than they think it's something they need to have. And they're asking for quick implementation of AI tools into their corporation without realizing what the particular threats are to that, the limitations that it has. It's not a silver bullet to solve all your business problems. It's a tool you can use that bad guys are also using, that hopefully cybersecurity defenders are also using. I mean, there's a lot of different areas AI can go into, but do I think it's going to end the planet? No, I don't think the Terminator is going to rise up tomorrow and kill all the humans, but technology does move quickly. So who's to say?
So maybe not go as far as the Terminator, but
Yeah.
overall, what would be the early warning signs that a company's innovation and AI strategy is outpacing the cyber readiness?
Ooh, that's a good question. I guess if its ability to adjust to what the blue teamers are doing to protect it out. So if the AI is a red, let's if we assume the AI is the red team and the blue team can't keep up the pace that the red team is doing, then I think you can say AI has gotten to a point where we need to figure out what we're going to really do with this because it's starting to spiral. I don't think we're close to that yet. But again, I'm not going to say I'm an AI expert. I use it certainly, but I don't develop it. I don't look at the underlying code. So I'm probably not the best person for that particular question. But I think that's where you'd see it, where if you can't ever if you can't ever beat it, right? If you can't ever beat the AI, then it's gotten to a point where it's figured something out. And the problem is there's plenty of fiction that makes it seem like it does these things. And the other problem is the media who reports on it believes the fiction and can't go into any depth to really see what the underlying actuality of it is. So there's a lot of misreporting on AI just because the media is stupid. But that's my own
That's
opinion on
that's a fair comment, I think. Okay,
that.
so if maybe AI is not your specialty, but cyber criminals and their thinking is. So can
hmm
you walk us through what cyber criminals look for when targeting companies and how leadership blind spots make that easier?
So it depends on the actor. You have to separate this into two different fields: cyber criminals and nation state cyber actors, right? So cyber criminals are just criminals. They rob banks, right? They want to financially gain from what it is that they do. Computers just make it easier for them to do that. So they're using computers as a tool to rob banks. If that's the best analogy, that's a pretty good analogy to make. So as far as who they look for opportunities. So they're not always going to say, if you have a ransomware group, they're not going to say, we're going to focus on this industry and just go after that. They're going to blast out whatever they can blast out, however their tool works, and hope someone clicks a link and installs malware on the system that gives them the initial intrusion point. So it's kind of a spray and pray kind of thing. They're not necessarily really saying this is who we want. They're just saying, hey, we got somebody here, great. Because there's certainly been instances where one of the entities that they found was a hospital, and some groups are like, we're not doing that. That's not who we're targeting. Or they've gotten into, let's say, a clear defense contractor that's very close to the Pentagon, and like, we're not dealing with that because we don't want the blowback from what that occurs. Nation state guys, your Russian state sponsored actors that are part of their national intelligence apparatus, the Chinese, the Iranians, the North Korean. Well, North Korean's a little different, but those three big, and actually Iran's probably a little less now, but Russia and China, if you look at those two big guys, they will say, okay, we need this information from this entity. Let's target them. So they will focus on them and they will figure out as much information as they can get open source wise. They will use human intelligence as well. So that's the other thing most companies don't realize is they have a cybersecurity problem, but they also have an intelligence gathering problem and a human intelligence gathering problem where they may be hiring people that are there simply to steal information from them. We had a company here in the US where I live when I was in the FBI who hired 3 Russians to do some stuff for them. And we looked at them pretty closely to say, are the Russians there to actually steal information? They weren't. They were there legitimately. But there's certainly instances where companies hire foreign people to do the things that they need them to do, and those people are there to steal the information. We've got case upon case of China doing this specifically. Not only will they hack into a company, but they will send people to it. We had a case years ago where there was a particular company that kept all their IP in a single room that was air gapped, that had all the main, if you think of the crown jewels of the company, the things they don't want stolen were air gapped, or in an air gap system in a locked room that had blue walls. Okay. Well, we had intelligence that China knew that the walls were blue and where it was located in the building, and had an email to somebody who lived in that area saying, we need you to get to that blue room in that company to get the information. So they had intelligence that knew the room was blue, where it was, and that's where the main crown jewels were. So there's that particular thing that it's hard for leaders to understand. Again, because they think, why would China target us? We don't have anything they would want. But China is looking to get intellectual property, information they can do to benefit their regime. We had another company here where I live that did copper tubing. Okay, that's all they made, copper tubes. Big deal, right? Who cares? Copper tubing, anybody could do that. But they were very successful. Had 500 employees, were very successful in what they did. And China said, "Hey, can we come see what you do? We just want to see how you do what you do." And they're like, "Yeah, come on, we'll show you everything." So they came in and they gave them as much information as they could. They answered their questions. A Chinese investment group opened a copper tubing company in the south part of the state and ran the first company out of business. Chances are pretty good they use cyber tactics to steal the information as well, in addition to the human piece.
So they attack in most unexpected ways. I guess the conversations around this by the C-suite should not just be technical, but also strategic. What different kind of talking points they should be focusing on when they're talking about cybersecurity this year?
Well, I think they need to realize what they want to protect. Like, what if we lose this? This is bad for us. So, what is that you need to make sure you're protecting? Several of the data breach cases I'm on, the company didn't encrypt their data, they encrypt the PII, and that's what they lost. If a bad actor gets in with legitimate credentials and is able to have access to the account that decrypts the folders anyway, encryption doesn't matter because they have access to it, right? They have admin rights, so they can decrypt it. So, that's kind of a moot point a little bit. But the bigger issue is, are you doing the basic critical controls? Do you have multi-factor authentication? A lot of these cases we're seeing now, the bad guys get in because they just logged in with the username and password. 16, what was it last week? 3 billion, 16 billion? I forget the number, but billions of legitimate usernames and passwords were compromised. Now, some of them were from older breaches, so it's not like it was new data. A lot of it was old. But not every bad actor has every piece of information. So if I'm a bad actor and I hack company A and I get 5 million pieces of information, that may be the only information I have. I can then use that to commit fraud. So because the company didn't have multi-factor authentication, I've said this many times on many podcasts and many presentations, bad guys currently are not hacking in generally. They're logging in because they have legitimate credentials, and companies aren't doing the basics to prevent that action, be it multi-factor authentication, train your employees, have good password policies, isolate information, zero trust, all those kind of things that, again, cybersecurity is a cost, and companies don't want to spend the money on the cost to do the protection, even though they're going to lose the thing that's most valuable to them.
Wow. That sounds like a lot to take in, and particularly for those leaders who are not naturally thinking about this, it's probably difficult to even know where to start. So how would you advise people to even start with this?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. And I've been saying this for about 2 years now. So I had a daily podcast where I talked about cyber news, right? I don't do it anymore. It's like I ran out of time. I couldn't get time for it. Not a lot of people listen to it. I'm like, forget this. But one of the things I said a lot was, if these big companies that are getting compromised can't do the basic things, how are the small and medium-sized companies going to do that? What they need to do is find help. Find someone who can come in and consult with, here's the basic thing. Do these 5 things first. If you don't do these 5 things, you're not doing the other advanced things. So that's no good. I mean, a cyber risk assessment, get a baseline. It doesn't have to be the NIST framework, the CIS framework. It should be something good, but you could certainly pare that down to a smaller set of pieces of information to get an idea of what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong, right? I did this for a church here locally, and it was only 50 questions. It was 10 control areas, 5 questions each, and out of a score of 100, they scored 29 because they're just not doing a lot of the stuff. So now they're trying to do those things. I guess this is a church, right? They're worried about obviously losing parishioner information and their money, that kind of stuff. But companies can do the same thing. If you're not under a specific framework requirement by law, like if you're healthcare here in the US, you have HIPAA you have to deal with. If you do business in the EU, you've got GDPR you got to deal with, right? So you've got frameworks you got to work with. But if you're in a business that doesn't have those frameworks that you're required to do assessments for, just have someone come in and say, hey, let's look at the basics. Let's look at these 10 areas, 5 questions each, and I'll kind of tell you how you're doing good or bad. Most of them are going to be doing bad. They're not going to be, because there's things they're just not thinking to do. And that gives you somewhere to start to say, okay, we don't have multi-factor authentication. We need to do that first. We don't even inventory our hardware or software. Let's start doing that so we know what we have. Because if you have this piece of software and you don't know where it's located, how do you patch it when there's a vulnerability? You can't. So you got to know where all your stuff is. So you got to do those things. Do you have data loss prevention? If you hire someone overseas who works from home and they steal all your information, how are you going to know? So there's basic things that a consultant can come in and say, you should probably think about doing this kind of stuff. At least start there. If you can eventually form your own cybersecurity team, great. If you don't ever want to do that, but you just want to have, a CISO would be great, but not everybody can afford it. But everybody can afford a fractional or a virtual CISO, someone who you can talk to once a month for an hour to say, here's things you should be doing. But then again, you have to do those things. You can't just hire someone and say, I've solved my problem because I got this guy over here. If I was to go in as a fractional CISO, the first thing I would say is, I'm not taking on your risk. You can't transfer your risk to me. I will help you mitigate and reduce your risk, but I'm not taking on your risk. It's still your risk. If you hire a third party to do your MSP stuff, that doesn't mean you're transferring your risk to them. They are assisting you in mitigating your risk by providing you an avenue to reduce it, but you still have to do the basic things. So find someone who can help you, find someone to talk to do those things. Gold Shield Cyber does that. But again, the problem is I've talked to many companies. No one wants to do it. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's great advice. Find some professionals who actually know what they're talking about. Is there anything that companies or those executives could prepare for before they even approach additional help?
It's a great question. I guess the best thing is find the people in your company that kind of do cyber stuff. Like identify that at least. Like you got IT people. Well, figure out who they are and who's the best ones at it, and get an idea from them. They're already there. You're already paying them. At least get some guidance from them. Say, hey, what do you think? If they, I don't know, I know how to make the mouse work. I don't know how to do the cyber stuff. Then okay, you've got no one. But see if you have anybody internal. You might have someone who's like, I pay attention to cybersecurity all the time. I went to Coding Temple and got 3 certifications. You're not paying me for the plus or the net plus or the A plus or whatever, but I have them. I know what I'm doing. I can do pen testing. Maybe you have people in your company already that do the things that can get you started. At least look internally and see what you have. If you don't, then you got to go find somebody. But chances are you probably have someone who knows something, or you may have someone who has a kid who knows something, who you can bring an intern in. Go to your local college and say, hey, we need a cyber intern, someone to come in that will get practical experience. We'll pay you $20 an hour for 5 hours a week for 6 months. Find help somewhere. Everybody who's listening to this is near a university that probably has some kind of IT or cybersecurity or information systems program that have people that would be willing to do internships or co-ops or whatever. There's plenty of those out there. You just got to look for them. You have to realize you need it and want it and go get it, as opposed to just crossing your fingers and saying, hopefully it doesn't happen to us today.
That's an excellent advice. And like you just said, people from Coding Temple, I'm sure there are plenty of our students who would jump at the opportunity to even volunteer at stuff like this.
Right.
So, yes.
And they don't need to be on site. They can do a lot of it remotely. Certainly if you can bring them on site, great. But if you just can't, then there's nothing wrong with having someone who's remote, because they can still help you remotely.
Yeah, exactly. And then they can help you kind of start putting together information that, the company already has, start building out the basic documentation, because from personal experience, I know there's a lot of documentation involved in this. Then with all that package, what you have, then people can go to a consultant to make the most out of the time and money. Awesome. And then, okay, so how does that change the larger the organization is, like the complexity of it, the amount of time it may need to take for you to get certified and properly secured?
Yeah, there's a friend of mine said this to me a couple of years ago, and I kind of use the same as an example. If you're a company that has a turnover of $1 billion or more, you're probably doing cybersecurity in some way, shape, or form anyway. Doesn't mean you're still not going to get compromised. You're still not going to have a problem, because there's been plenty of those that have. But you're probably in a better position that you've at least got people in place to do the right things. Whether they're doing the right things or not, I don't know. If you're 100 million to $1 billion, you've at least thought about it. You probably have some kind of fractional CISO. You may have some help from there. If you're 100 million or less, you're probably not thinking about it at all. So,
How much more difficult it gets from a small organization thinking about their cybersecurity to a large?
Yeah. So again, larger is probably a little easier because they have the resources to do it, and they're probably doing it. Smaller is very hard because resources are hard, right? Cybersecurity is a cost. So the smaller you are, the harder it's going to be. But you can find workarounds to it that aren't necessarily that expensive, like the interns, the Coding Temple folks, whoever, that can do the stuff that can get you started. Ultimately, you're going to have to spend money on certain basics to do the basic things, but you can scale that down by having someone come and say, here's the most important things you need to do right now, right? You may do a risk assessment and find you're doing everything right. You got everything in place you want to, your risk is pretty low. So that means I don't really do much. I can keep talking to this guy once a month at 2,000 a month or whatever, and that'd probably get me where I need to go. The average cost for a CISO is what, 250,000 bucks a year? So that's 20,000 a month. So if you can get away with it for 3 to 5,000 a month for a fractional CISO, why would you not do that? At least have someone you can talk to. It's kind of like a trainer. If you go to the gym by yourself, you kind of flail around. If you hire a trainer, he'll help you get where you need to go. The trainer's not going to work out for me. The trainer's not going to eat the right food for me. I still got to do the right things myself because this is what my trainer said. So think of your cybersecurity consultant person as your trainer saying, I can't fix your system. I can help you find people that can fix it from that perspective, MSPs, MSSPs, whatever. But you have to have that person to guide you through that. And that's where I think the big difference is the big companies have CISO level folks or CIOs that know those kind of things. Small to mediums don't and need some kind of support for that.
Yeah. And I'm sure you're yet to see a company that doesn't need any help in their cyber.
Right.
Awesome. Cool. So, okay. So you've obviously spent like decades seeing all the fallout from poor cybersecurity leadership. If you could stand in front of every CEO and executive in America right now, what's the one thing you'd ask them to take seriously right now?
What keeps you up at night? If they say nothing, then I say, well, that's a problem. That should be keeping you up at night because do you know who's coming at? Do you know do you know who wants your information? Do you even know that? That'd be my first question. Do you know what the bad guys want? Do you know who's targeting you? The tagline on my podcasts, all of them are understand the threats targeting you so you can assess your risk, proceed wisely. So that first part, know who's targeting you, right? Is China targeting you? If you sell perfume, China is not coming after you. But if you sell millions of dollars per year in perfume, cyber criminals are coming after you because you've got money and you've got probably client lists that would be valuable to steal the information from. So understand who's targeting you. And then once you understand that, figure out how are you going to defend against that? What's your defense against that? Are you investing in consulting? Do you have a CISO? Do you have a cyber group? Do you have an MSSP? Or are you praying and crossing your fingers that they don't ever find you?
Okay, excellent. So the last question for me to you is, in the current day and age, with how and where AI is going, where do you see the importance of robust cybersecurity systems in the businesses going?
It's got to increase because the bad guys are going to use the AI to do the bad things that they do. So you're going to have people who can defend against it by using the AI to defend against it so that when new stuff comes out, that is a new form of ransomware, right? Like 2 years from now, we don't know what ransomware is going to look like. It's going to be something completely different than it is today and probably much more damaging. So, and it's because bad guys are going to use AI to create that, right? They're going to use ransomware just like all the rest of us who can't code by coding our websites. So you've got to have people in place with the strategic mind and the tactical mind to be able to protect against what the bad guys are doing. And part of that is threat intelligence is probably the biggest thing. In other words, having a conduit that brings information that says, here are the threats targeting our industry, right? If you're a transportation company, your threats are a little different than a financial company, which are a little different than a healthcare company, which are a little different than the perfume company. Okay. But you should still have threat intelligence provide, and there's free threat intelligence everywhere. Just ask people, where can I get threat intelligence on whatever, and get those feeds in that say, do a Google daily, a Google alert on your industry and cyber. That's all you got to do, at least to start. That's where you should start. So I'm in trucking. So trucking cyber, get that Google alert and say, okay, Russians are targeting the transportation industry in the UK. Here's how they're doing it. Here's what they're looking to do. You now have intelligence say, okay, this is how they're coming at me. Am I protected against what this is telling me? Right? That's probably the most important thing, is having some kind of legitimate and regular threat intelligence feed to understand the threats targeting you so you can assess your risk and proceed wisely.
Excellent. I'm definitely going to set something up like this right now for ed tech companies. Thank you very
Yes,
much.
exactly.
This has been awesome. Darren, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your incredible knowledge with all our audience. I'm sure everyone will find really, really good starting points in what you said. And so, to what actually stood out to me the most in today's conversation is that cybersecurity isn't a tech thing anymore. It's a leadership thing. And it's going to be extremely important as time goes on for people to think more and more, particularly in those leadership positions, how to future-proof your organizational design, particularly in the world of AI. And Darren's decades of experience shows us that, executives need to not wait too long to take this ownership. And if you're not taking ownership, it's already maybe getting a bit too late. So thank you once again, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Decoded. And if you're a tech leader navigating the evolving world of AI and organizational design, or if you're someone looking to break into tech, change careers, upskill, or simply find the right job support, we're here to help. At Coding Temple, we specialize in talent pipeline advice and workforce upskilling, preparing people and teams for the future of work through hands-on training and our dedicated careers camp. Thanks again for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you next time as we explore more ways to thrive in a tech-driven world.